made a decision recently. It might have seemed small from the outside, but you know the weight it carried. And there's a reason you're still thinking about it, still feeling that relief mixed with a knot in your stomach. Because this decision wasn't just any decision, it was the kind of choice that changes the trajectory of an entire life. And what I'm going to show you today is that you didn't make that decision alone. There was something greater waiting for it. Stay right here, because what comes next is going to make all of this make sense in a way you've never imagined. Have you ever stopped to count how many decisions you make in a single day? Researchers at Harvard University estimate that an adult makes about 35,000 decisions a day. 35,000. Most of them are automatic, mechanical, invisible. What to eat, which route to take, how to reply to a message. But among those thousands of routine choices, there exists a rare kind of decision that carries a completely different weight. A decision born not from habit, but from consciousness. One taken not because it's easy, but because it's true. And when that decision happens, it doesn't go unnoticed on the plane you cannot see. Today, I want to speak directly to you about your last big decision. The one that cost you something, that required courage, that perhaps hasn't been recognized by anyone around you yet, but that you carry in your chest like a marker, a before and an after. If you're here, it's no accident. And before I go on, let me tell you one thing. You did the right thing. Even if it still hurts, even if it still creates doubt, you did the right thing. Let's start at the beginning, with what no one saw. There is a battle that happens in silence. It has no audience, no camera, no witnesses. It's that internal conversation you've been having for months, maybe years. That voice that whispered in the back of your mind while you pretended you were fine. While you followed a routine that increasingly felt like a shirt 2 sizes too small, one that pinched, that suffocated, but that you kept wearing because it was what you knew. That voice didn't go away. It waited. Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you. And strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment. With patience, because it knew you would come to it when you were ready. And what happens when someone finally stops running from themselves is extraordinary. It's not dramatic, it's not glorious, it's quiet, almost whispered, but it's absolutely real. Your last big decision was the end of that internal conversation. You didn't decide in an instant. You decided over sleepless nights, over moments when you swallowed hard and carried on, over times you chose the difficult path when the easy one was right there, within reach. Each of those nights was a brick, and when you finally acted, the structure was already built. You just took the step to enter it. Now I need to explain something to you that will change how you see all of this. There is a concept that appears in diverse spiritual traditions, from Stoic philosophy to the wisdom of Native American elders, through Christian wisdom and Eastern practices, which can be summed up like this. The universe is not indifferent to your choices. It responds to them, not in a magical and instant way like some spiritual vending machine, but in a deep, progressive, and absolutely real way. When you act in alignment with your deepest truth, when you choose integrity over convenience, when you protect your peace, even if it costs something familiar and comfortable, you send out a signal. This signal doesn't go into the air, it goes into you first, and then it reverberates outward in ways you will begin to notice in the coming weeks and months. Science calls this coherence, spirituality calls it alignment, but at its core it's the same thing. When what you think, what you feel, and what you do are all pointing in the same direction, you stop wasting internal energy on conflict. And that released energy goes where you truly need it to go. And you know what's fascinating? This has scientific backing. Researchers at the HeartMath Institute in the United States have studied the phenomenon of heart coherence for decades. They discovered that when a person is in a state of emotional coherence, their heart rhythm literally changes. And this altered rhythm affects the nervous system, the immune system, cognitive clarity, and even how you perceive opportunities around you. In other words, when you align with your truth, your own body enters a different state. You literally think more clearly, act with more precision, attract more efficiently. This is not a metaphor, it's physiology. But I want to return to the human point of all this, because I know that when you made this decision, it wasn't without cost. Let me ask you something directly. When you made this choice, how many people understood it right away? How many people applauded? How many came to you and said, "Congratulations, you did the right thing"? Probably very few, perhaps none, because life's greatest victories are rarely celebrated publicly. They happen in silence. And that silence can be heavy, especially for those living in a culture where external applause has become the currency of validation. American culture can be deeply individualistic, yet paradoxically approval-seeking. We value success, visibility, and external validation. This has its beauty in many ways, but it has a shadow side. When you need to make a decision that goes against the tide, that will displease someone, that breaks an established pattern, the social weight can be crushing. You feel as if you're betraying the tribe, and that feeling of betrayal is one of the greatest enemies of personal growth. But here's the truth that many people don't tell. At a certain point in life, you must choose between the approval of others and your own self-approval. And the one who chooses their own approval first is not being selfish. They are being honest. You chose honesty, and that has a price. But it also has a return that no other currency pays. Let's talk about what you left behind, because that is as important as what you are moving toward. When you close a door that was suffocating you, a strange thing happens. Part of you misses it, even if it was harmful. Even if every time you walked through it, you came back a little smaller, a little more tired, a little further from yourself. Familiarity has a hypnotic power. The human brain prefers the predictable, even if the predictable is painful, over the unknown, even if the unknown is liberating. Neuroscientists call this the status quo bias. Our nervous system is programmed to conserve energy, and change costs energy. So it creates resistance to any change, even those we logically know are good for us. That's why so many people stay in jobs they hate, draining relationships, limiting social circles. It's not a lack of intelligence, it's biology. But you overcame biology. You went beyond the instinct for conservation and chose growth. That is rare. It is literally against the nature of most people. And you did it. What you left behind was a leak. Think of a leaky pipe in your house. You don't see the water leaking, but the water bill arrives high every month. Dampness appears on the walls, the pressure drops. And you keep wondering why things don't work right, why you're always tired, why even when everything seems okay, something still doesn't add up. It's because there's a leaky pipe, and you finally found it and fixed it. That leak could have been a relationship that drained your energy for years without nurturing you back. It could have been a work environment that required you to be an edited and reduced version of yourself. It could have been a behavioral pattern you inherited without question, a way of dealing with fear, with conflict, with pain, that worked when you were 10, but at 35, 40, 50, no longer serves. It could have been a belief, a story you told yourself about who you are and what you deserve. Whatever it was, you stopped it. And that is not small, it is everything. Now I want to talk about something I deeply believe, and which various spiritual traditions, in different forms, confirm. There is an invisible economy operating parallel to the economy you see. In the visible economy, what you do publicly, what you post, what you show, the job title you have, the accolades you accumulate, this is the resume the world sees. But there is another resume, an invisible resume, and on it are recorded completely different things. How many times you chose truth when a lie would have been more convenient? How many times you protected someone who couldn't protect you back? How many times you had the courage to say no when all the pressures pointed to a yes? How many times you continued when it would have been easier to quit? How many times you acted with integrity with no one watching? This invisible resume determines the kind of person you become. And the kind of person you become determines the kind of life you attract, not as a magical law of attraction, but as a natural consequence of character. People of solid character make different decisions, they build different relationships, they create different environments, and they live qualitatively different lives. When you act in alignment with your deepest values, you're not just doing the right thing in moral terms. You are investing in this invisible resume. You are making a deposit into an account that yields interest in clarity, self-respect, inner peace. And that interest compounds. Over time, it amounts to a life you don't need to escape from. Let me tell you something about generational patterns, because this will touch on something you may not yet have realized about your decision. There is a field of research called epigenetics that in the last 2 decades has revolutionized how we understand inheritance. We've discovered that we don't just inherit genes, we inherit patterns of behavior, stress responses, emotional survival strategies that our ancestors developed in contexts completely different from our own. Trauma passed down from generation to generation, not just as told memories, but as patterns etched into the body. This means that the fear you feel about standing your ground may not be yours alone. The pattern of yielding, of dimming your light to avoid conflict, of sacrificing your needs to keep the peace around you, may have reached you through generations who survived in contexts where dimming their light was literally a survival strategy. Your grandparents, great-grandparents, in a land of vast opportunity, yet also profound inequality, of rigid social hierarchies and unspoken rules, learned that it's safer to stay quiet, that it's safer to agree, that it's safer not to shine too brightly. These patterns reached you, and for a long time you followed them, not out of weakness, out of inheritance, but when you made your last big decision, when you stood your ground, when you chose your truth over approval, when you stopped performing and began to exist for real, you did something extraordinary. You broke the pattern, without fanfare, without a speech, without a manifesto. You simply acted differently. And this silent act has reverberations that go far beyond your own life, because the patterns you break are not confined to you. They propagate. Your children will inherit a different version of the message. Your nieces and nephews will absorb a different model. The people around you will be touched, even if they can't explain why. You didn't just change your story. You began to rewrite the story of your lineage. That is too big to fit into any public applause. Let's talk now about what comes next. Because this decision was a beginning, not an end. There is a very common mistake people make after a big decision. They expect life to immediately confirm they did the right thing. They expect doors to open, people to recognize them, results to appear. And when that doesn't happen immediately, doubt creeps in. Did I make a mistake? Should I have stayed? Did I act too hastily? That doubt is normal. It's human, and it is completely misleading. The most powerful seeds are those that take the longest to germinate. A tree that will last 100 years doesn't grow in a week. The period between planting and harvesting is the most difficult and the most important. It's where most people give up. It's where you need faith, not evidence. Faith is not blindly believing in something without reason. Faith is trusting a process you cannot see completely, but for which you have sufficient evidence to sustain you. And the evidence you have is this: you acted in alignment with your deepest values. You stood your ground with integrity. You stopped betraying yourself. That evidence is enough. The rest comes with time. There is also something I want to tell you about the relief you felt. That relief that came after the decision. That feeling that a weight was lifted from your shoulders, that you finally took a deep, true breath. Wasn't just emotional. It was a physical, measurable signal from your nervous system moving out of a chronic state of alert and into a state of safety. The entire time you were in that situation that needed to change, your body was in survival mode. High cortisol, sympathetic nervous system activated, the body's resources diverted from creative and regenerative functions to fight or flight functions. When you left that situation, your nervous system recognized the danger as ended, and it relaxed. That relief was literally your body saying, "Thank you, finally." But there's more. That relief was also your inner being, the part of you that knows your deepest essence, confirming that you moved in the right direction. There are philosophers, psychologists, and spiritual teachers from diverse cultures who describe this phenomenon in different ways, but with a common essence. There exists within every human being an internal compass. It doesn't use words. It uses sensations. And when you act in alignment with it, it confirms. When you act against it, it protests. The relief you felt was the compass confirming. Now I need to talk about something delicate, but very important, about the cost of this decision. Every big decision has a cost. There is no alignment without loss. There is no growth without discomfort. When you chose peace, you may have lost a relationship. When you chose integrity, you may have lost an opportunity that looked good on the surface. When you chose your truth, you may have lost the approval of people who matter to you. That pain is real. I won't minimize it, and it would be dishonest of me to suggest that the right decision doesn't hurt. Sometimes the most right decision is the one that hurts the most in the short term, but there is a fundamental difference between the pain of growth and the pain of stagnation. The pain of growth is acute, localized, and diminishes over time as you move forward. The pain of stagnation is chronic, diffuse, and increases the longer you stay still. You know both kinds, and you chose the first. The loss you felt, or are still feeling, is the price of admission to a level of life you are still building. It's the ticket, and you paid it. Let me bring you now to a point that will change how you see yourself from here on out. Have you heard of spiritual availability? It's a simple but profound concept. The idea is that certain things, certain opportunities, certain connections, certain levels of life don't come to you by chance or by isolated effort. They arrive when you become available for them. And availability isn't about having time or space in your schedule. It's about having internal space. While you were in that situation that needed to change, you were occupied, not just physically, spiritually, emotionally, energetically. A significant part of your attention, your creative energy, your capacity to perceive and act was being consumed by it. There was no space left. When you made the decision and closed that door, you created space. And nature, as they say, abhors a vacuum. The space you created will be filled. The question isn't if it will be filled. The question is, with what? And here is where your decision becomes even more powerful. When you create space from an act of integrity and alignment, What comes to fill that space tends to resonate with the quality of that act. You won't attract more of what you left behind. You will attract what corresponds to the level from which you are now acting. This is what I call an energetic upgrade, and it's silent, but it's real. I want to talk now about readiness, because this is one of life's greatest traps. How many times have you waited to be ready to act? To change jobs, to end a relationship, to start a project, to stand your ground, to say no, to say yes. And how many times did that readiness never arrive, or arrive so late that the window had already closed? Readiness is a gentle lie our mind tells to protect us from risk. When I have more money, when the kids are older, when I learn more, when I feel stronger. These whens are invisible fences that keep people trapped in lives that don't reflect who they truly are. You did something different. You acted without feeling completely ready. And here is the secret that great life transformers know. Readiness is not a prerequisite for action. It is a consequence of it. You don't feel ready and then act. You act and then you feel ready. Confidence comes after the step, not before. You proved this to yourself. And that proof wasn't theoretical. It was lived, recorded in your body, in your memory, in your identity. The next time the voice of "when I'm ready" appears, you will have concrete evidence to reply, "I have acted without being ready, and it worked." This is one of the most valuable internal resources a human being can have. I also need to speak to you about positioning, because it changes everything. For a long time, many of us have lived in reactive mode, waiting for life to happen and then responding, waiting for people to decide and then adapting, waiting for the context to change and then moving. This is the passive mode of existence, and it generates a constant feeling that life is happening to you, not through you. When you made your decision, you changed modes. You moved from reactive to proactive. You stopped waiting for the situation to resolve itself and decided to resolve it. You stopped waiting for permission and authorized yourself. This is one of the greatest leaps in consciousness a person can make. In the modern world, especially for generations navigating constant change and information overload, reactive mode can often feel like the only sane response. When everything feels unpredictable, it makes sense to wait, adapt, survive. But when you begin to have more autonomy, more internal resources, more clarity about who you are, staying in reactive mode becomes a limitation you impose on yourself. You stepped out of that limitation, you took the helm, and this fundamentally changes your relationship with what lies ahead. Now, I want to tell you about something that is rarely discussed, the weight of carrying a false version of yourself for too long. There is a huge psychological cost to performing an identity that is not your own. Psychologists call this identity dissonance. When what you show the world diverges from what you feel inside, the brain works in overdrive, trying to reconcile these two realities. It's like trying to maintain two different stories simultaneously. You need to remember who you are for certain people, how you act in certain environments, which parts of yourself you hide in each context. This is exhausting in a way that goes far beyond physical tiredness. Think of the people you know who always seem tired, even sleeping well, even without an apparent reason. Often that tiredness has a name. It's the tiredness of being two at the same time, of living divided between who you are and who you believe you need to appear to be. When you made your decision, you began to end that division. You began to converge, to become one person, whole, consistent, not perfect, whole. And there is a huge difference between those two things. Perfection is an armor. Wholeness is a liberation. This process of convergence doesn't happen all at once. It's gradual, but it has a starting point, and yours was this decision. There is also a relational dimension that needs to be mentioned, because when you change, your relationships change too. Some relationships will deepen. the people who were by your side for who you really are, and not for the edited version you presented, these people will draw closer. They will feel they can finally see the real you. And you will feel the difference of that authentic connection compared to everything that came before. But other relationships will drift away. And that can hurt, because part of you may interpret the drifting as rejection. But there is another way to read this dynamic. Sometimes people don't drift away from you because you got worse. They drift away because you grew, and the space between where you are now and where they are became too great to be maintained without effort from both sides. It's not abandonment, it's natural realignment. The people who stay after a big change are the ones who truly belong in the next chapter of your story. And the ones who leave were often only connected to the previous chapter. Trust this movement, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Let's talk about the future now, not in a vague and poetic way, but concretely. The decision you made created a new starting point, not a finish line, a starting point. And this starting point is at a higher level than where you were before. This means that the next decisions you will make will depart from this higher place. And the decisions made from a higher place tend to be more aligned, clearer, more courageous. It's a virtuous cycle. An aligned decision generates clarity. Clarity generates confidence. Confidence generates more precise action. More precise action generates more aligned results. And those results confirm and reinforce the cycle. You initiated this cycle. It's already spinning. But there is something I want to warn you about, because it would be negligent of me not to mention it. Real growth is not linear. It has curves, apparent setbacks, plateau moments that seem like stagnation, but are, in fact, integration. There is research in developmental psychology that shows that after great leaps in growth, a period of consolidation is common and necessary. The system needs to adapt to the new level. New neural circuits need to solidify. New identities need to be inhabited. So if in the coming days or weeks you feel that the euphoria of the decision has passed and everything seems a bit more nebulous, don't interpret that as a sign you were wrong. It's the process of integration. It's your internal system reorganizing itself around the new center of gravity you created. Trust the process. Keep showing up, even without total clarity, especially without total clarity. Before I close, I want to bring you back to the title of what you are living. You were chosen. I know that might sound too grandiose, but listen, I'm not talking about an arbitrary or mystical choice that puts you above others. I'm talking about a dynamic you can observe in your own life. The right path didn't wait for you to be ready. It was already there, already forming. Every piece you lived, every pain you moved through, every lesson you accumulated was paving that path. And at a certain moment, when you finally aligned with it, when you stopped resisting and began to move, it received you, as if it had been waiting, as if it knew you would arrive. In the diverse spiritual traditions of this land, from the deep wisdom of native elders to the contemplative streams of Christianity, from the insights of transcendental philosophy to the heart of mindfulness practices, there exists a profound belief that there are greater forces orchestrating trajectories with an intelligence our conscious minds cannot fully grasp. Not in a way that removes your responsibility or free will, but in a way that places your life within a larger context, more meaningful, more full of purpose. When you act with integrity, when you choose truth, when you honor what is most genuine within you, you align with that greater intelligence, and it celebrates. Not with fireworks, with that relief you felt, with that sensation that finally what is inside and what is outside are the same thing, with that strange quietness that coexists with all the uncertainty. That celebration wasn't in the headlines, it wasn't in anyone's comments. It was in the silence after you made the decision, in the sleep that finally came, in the breath that sank a little deeper, in the internal voice that for the first time in a long time, fell quiet. That was the celebration. You felt it, and you deserved every second of it. So now I ask you, what will you do with this new starting point? Because the decision was the beginning, and beginnings demand continuity. Keep positioning yourself. Keep choosing your truth, even when it's inconvenient. Keep protecting your peace, even if it costs approval. Keep breaking the patterns that no longer serve. Keep being the version of you that made that courageous decision. Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you. And strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment.